As you already know, stress is a part of life, and there are many different sources of stress. Stress can come at you from so many different directions, so many different situations. But some of the stress that you experience, that all of us experience, can be self-induced to a larger degree or to a smaller degree. At least you have some part in some of the stress that is part of your life. And that's a truth for everybody. I don't think that anybody is exempt from that. So, considering that there is too much stress in our lives and there is plenty of stress, plenty of sources of stress which we can't really control. We can do other things regarding that, but we can't really control. Why not grab a hold of the type of stress that comes with the stressors where we are contributors, where we are participants? So one of those examples would be your own expectations from other people and other situations. When we have certain expectations, and again, this is true for everybody, when we have certain expectations, sometimes those expectations are met, sometimes they're exceeded, and sometimes they're not met. A lot of times they're not met. And what happens when these expectations aren't met? Well, what happens is sometimes we get disappointed, sometimes we get angry, sometimes we get depressed or take it personally. Sometimes we get stressed out. And that's one of those things where our own involvement, our own contribution to our general stress comes in the form of our very own expectations. So think about what kind of expectations do you have of other people, of your job, of people at work, people in your personal life, of different situations in your life. And then what happens when those expectations aren't met? How do you react? How do you deal with that? Once you have a better understanding of what you tend to expect from the world around you, and that includes people, places, situations, you have a better chance of being able to control that. If your expectations are high or even sometimes unrealistic, then you're much more likely to end up feeling stressed out about it or feeling disappointed when things don't go your way, when those expectations aren't met, which is why it's so important to understand what our expectations are. Now, I'm not saying that you should not have any expectations or that your expectations should be low, but you have to understand whether your expectations are, one, realistic, and two, whether those expectations contribute to a stressful life for you when they are not met. So let me explain a little bit more. Expectations are important and we should all have them. We must have them. For example, when children feel that there are higher expectations of them, higher but also reasonable, they tend to live up to those expectations. And that's for good expectations and bad expectations. So if you expect a child to be a good student, and you provide them all the support, all the resources that they need, they are much more likely to live up to that than if you don't have that expectation. If you expect that they are an average student at best, that's probably where they will end up in terms of statistics anyway. And of course, if we have expectations for bad things, the same thing applies. If we expect that something will be horrible, there's a good chance that it will be. So it's important to have expectations, but it's important to have those expectations in check, to know what they are, to know whether they're realistic, and to know how they affect you when they are not met. Some expectations may be worth giving up. If you expect that everybody on the road during your commute will drive according to all of the laws, obey the speed limit, be courteous and polite, you're going to be disappointed every time you get on the road. You know that. So that's not really a reasonable expectation. That's not to say that you shouldn't strive to those expectations for yourself. It's good to be polite and a good member of the society, have proper behaviors, but to expect that everybody else will do that too is simply not realistic. It's nice when those expectations are met, but it can't bring you down or stress you out when they aren't met. So this is why it's so important to know what your expectations are, to know whether your expectations are contributing to your stress, or you're feeling bad or depressed or anxious, or feeling down because the expectations are not met. It can be very frustrating if you have high expectations of others and they consistently don't meet those expectations. Sometimes this is, well, oftentimes this can be a problem for high achievers, people who naturally strive for excellence and are high achievers by their very nature. They expect, or they tend to expect, I should say, the same from others. And the reality is that high achievers are a much smaller percentage in this world than those of average aspirations or below average aspirations when combined. So you can see how that example of a high achiever having the expectations that everybody else will be on their level will be sorely disappointed just when dealing with the general population of humanity, because again, high achievers tend to be in a much smaller group or percentage of humans. That's just the way it is. There's a lot of people who are average, and then there are some people who are below that average when it comes to achievement, or maybe their motivation for achievement, whatever the case may be. And again, high achievers, I'm using that as an example. These tend to be people who strive for excellence, who are driven, who are hard workers and ready and able and willing to give up a lot of other things for the achievements that they deem valuable, necessary, and worthy of their efforts. That doesn't mean that necessarily they're smarter, certainly doesn't mean that they're better people, but I'm speaking strictly about high achievers as an example when it comes to expectations that we may have of others. Now that you know something about this idea of how your expectations could be contributing to the stress in your life, it's time to step back, zoom out, so to speak, and take a look at your own expectations. What are your expectations like? And remember, it's important to have expectations. We can't have a life without expectations. That would be crazy, right? That's just not possible. We have to have expectations, but are they reasonable? Are they realistic? Are they helpful for others and for yourself? So this is something to examine. This is something to consider. So take a few minutes after you finish watching this video and ponder about your own expectations and whether your expectations are met, whether they are met most of the time, some of the time, just a few times as an example, or maybe if your expectations are exceeded and met most or all of the time, maybe they're too low. And then finally think about, how are your expectations affecting you? Are they causing you stress? Are they causing you to take things personally when they don't go your way or when the expectation isn't met? Are they bringing more anxiety or maybe even sometimes feelings of depression into your own life. So think about your own expectations, what they are, how realistic they are, where they are on the level of too low, just right, or too high, and how they affect your life. And remember that not only are expectations important and a perfectly normal part of life, but we have different expectations for different people, different situations, different things. So it's not just all one size fits all, one type of expectation. You may have high expectations in certain cases or for certain people or in certain environments, and lower expectations in different environments or for different situations of people. So today, take a look at your own expectations, how they rate in terms of how realistic and effective they are, how they affect you, and how they affect others.